This is Elvis Online, and I'm Joe Krein, and I've got somebody with me today, Jerry Chesnutt. Jerry, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Joe.
That's good. Hey, Jerry, can you tell us how where you were born and raised?
I was born and raised in coal mining camps in eastern Kentucky, Harlan County.
Okay. What did you want to do when you grew up?
I had played a guitar. I told everybody I was going to go to Nashville and be a star like all these guys that I was listening to I listened to the Midday Merry-Go-Round in Knoxville, Tennessee every day, and I listened to the Grand Ole Opry every Saturday night. And that was my connection, and I just decided I was going to live in Nashville and be a star. You know how kids are that dream.
Yeah, and your dream came true.
Everybody thought I was crazy.
Who was your early musical influences?
I had a friend. I really didn't have any influences, per se. I did. I had a friend that had two records and a record player, and one of them was a record by Zeke Clements. I don't remember if it was Smoke on the Water or what it was. And then he had an Eddie Arnold record. Mm-hmm. And so I told him one of these days I'll meet these guys and I'll work with them. And it's an unbelievable thing. I nominated and got Zeke Clements in the Hall of Fame after I came here. And Eddie Arnold and I had lunch at least once a week up until the point of his death. We were very close, and it's unbelievable how that dream of a little guy in a coal mine camp could happen only in America.
Yeah. So how did you get into the music business?
Well, the first time I ever done anything, I entered an amateur contest before I even started school. I was about 5, and I played the guitar, and my brother got a guitar for Christmas, and my daddy showed it to me and told me that the one thing you don't do is you don't never touch this. And I made up my mind right then I was going to be a guitar player. So anyway, I played that guitar, and they had a amateur contest at the school, and whoever won the amateur contest would get either a quarter in cash or a free haircut at Dan Hill's barber shop. And I won the amateur contest, and I took the quarter, and my mother cut my hair, and I turned pro right then.
There you go. So what was the first song that you wrote?
I wasn't even into writing songs. I wasn't even thinking about writing. I was thinking about playing a guitar and being a star, you know.
Uh-huh.
And when I came to Nashville, that was my goal.
Okay.
But I had been all over the world and had bands, and I had Western swing bands in the Far East and everything during the Korean War and through special services, and I'd played so many clubs and had so many bands and all that then I was living in Jacksonville. I was a railroad conductor in Jacksonville, and I was playing on CBS on weekends and playing barn dances during the week and stuff. And so I decided I wasn't doing anything that I couldn't do in Nashville, so I moved to Nashville. I thought I can railroad there if I need to. When I got here, Webb Pierce was the first one that told me. He said, "We don't need no more stars, son." He said, "What we need is somebody to write some hits for the stars we've got." And I thought, well, if that's what they need, that's what I'll try to do. And so I started trying to write songs then. And I worked on songs and tried to write songs and listened to what was playing on the radio and listened to the songs that were out and kind of, I'd try one thing. If that didn't work, I'd try another. And about 10 years later, then I got my first release by Dale Reeves, which was A Dime at a Time.
Okay.
And then we had about 10 top 10s with Dale, and everybody started hearing this, and it was so different from what everybody else had been writing. And Eddie Arnold had been doing nothing but horse songs, the Tennessee Stud and all that stuff, and And rock and roll, they was talking about closing the opera because rock and roll had just about knocked country music in the head at that time. That was in '58.
Uh-huh.
And so I just kept working and trying to write songs. And I know I worked for about 10 years on Another Place, Another Time. And finally got the thing done, and Nora Wilson did it on the Ralph Emery show. And it had never been recorded by anybody. And Dale Reeves was on the show with him, and he heard it and wanted to know where he could get a copy of that. Then when he got ready to record, they called, and I was at his office, and so Nora said, I'll send the guy over there with it. And so I took it over there, and I played him a dime at a time and that. And they wanted to know who had the publishing on it, and I said, nobody. And they said, well, who paid for this session and paid the musicians and everything? And I said, I did. So Bob Montgomery was running United Artists Records, and he was producing Dale, and he said, why don't we start a publishing company, and you write for it, and we'll do these 2 songs tonight. So we went in the studio and did those 2 songs and listened to them till 2 o'clock in the morning, and then people started coming to me like Porter Wagner and stuff and wanted to know if I had a hit for them.
Uh-huh.
And it was off and running.
Wow. So what was your first successful song?
The first hit I ever had was A Dime at a Time. It was in the Billboard chart 5 months, but the first song I ever wrote was Another Place, Another Time.
Okay. All right. Now, were you an Elvis fan?
Not necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
I was aware of him, but it was another world.
Right. It was that rock and roll that was closing down country.
Yeah, the music business in Nashville consisted, like Billy Sherrill, for example, was in one office, and I was in the next office, and I had no earthly idea of what he was doing, and he had no earthly idea of what I was doing. It was made up of a bunch of little worlds. Everybody had their own little world in what they was doing.
Mm-hmm. Did you specifically write any songs for Elvis?
No. I did later. I did in later years after he started doing my stuff. I started writing not just hit songs. I started trying to write great songs. You follow me?
Uh-huh.
It kind of stepped up my dream of what I ought to be writing rather than just writing a hit. And that's when I started writing Love Coming Down and that type of song, you know?
Right. Now, how did it come about that Elvis was going to record your music?
I'm sorry?
How did it come about that Elvis was going to record your music? Who brought the music to Elvis?
Lamar Fike was one of Elvis's mafia or whatever you want to call it. You know Lamar.
Sure.
And Lamar had been running, when Elvis was on the road, he was running Hill and Range Music, a publishing company.
Uh-huh.
And I don't think they got along too well or something. Anyway, they was wanting to get him out. They was wanting to get him out, get rid of him. And they asked him what he would take to just leave, you know, and he told them if they'd buy him a new Fleetwood Cadillac and give it to him, and it paid for, he'd leave, just walk off. So they did. And he drove over to my office building, which was right next door to Capitol in Columbia, right on Music Row, and he come over to my building and wanted to know if I would furnish him an office and let him pitch songs for me as payment for it, you know. And he said, you know, all this songs that he could pitch and all this stuff he could do. And
Uh-huh.
I said, okay. And he pitched one thing to Tanya Tucker, and she did it. And it was an album cut. And that's the only thing he ever got cut. But when Elvis would record, a lot of times Lamar would go to the session. And one time he got ready to record, and he said, put me about 3 or 4 songs together that you think Elvis might like, and said, I'll take them down there and see if he likes one of them. And one of them was It's Midnight. So he took it down there. And that evening he called me and said, we're in the studio and Elvis loves It's Midnight. And he had just got a divorce from Prissy, and it really kind of suited his world right at that time.
Right.
In fact, later on, one of the guys that wrote a book said that was her favorite song of everything he ever done, and was talking about how he would walk to the edge of the stage when she'd come to visit when he was doing a show in Vegas or somewhere, and said he'd stand there on the edge of the stage and do It's Midnight. And in fact, I've got a recording of where he did it on stage, and when he introduced the song, he said, now listen, Prissy, and then he started singing. So he kind of associated with that and fell in love with the song, and he had heard the demo enough to where he could sing along with it pretty well without the lyrics, but Lamar had lost the lyrics or something. Anyway, he didn't have them. And Lamar called me and said, they're running it down. The musicians are, and Elvis is singing along with it, but we can't find the lyrics. And I said, well, get a pencil and paper. It's just one verse in the chorus, and repeat the chorus. You can write it down. So I did. I gave him the words, and he did it, and it was his single. And from that day on, every time that Lamar would get a call from Elvis that he was going in the studio, regardless of where it was, he'd want him to come down, and he'd say, check and see what Jerry's got.
Right. Wow. You still there?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell me the first time that you met Elvis?
Yeah. I was in Memphis, and Lamar called me at Sheraton Motor Inn. I was in the executive suite there at poolside, and he called me and said, we're going to a movie, and said, Elvis said to call you and see if you wanted to go. So I said, yeah, I'd love to. So we went, and before the movie started, when Elvis showed up, Lamar introduced me to him. And I guess everybody except me, when they met Elvis, they would just go out of it. Otherwise, it was shocking, you know?
Sure.
But I had met Jerry Lee Lewis and Tom Jones and George Jones, and I'd had #1 records by just about everybody in the country. And Elvis, to me, was kind of maybe the Superman of all of them. And I guess I expected it to be completely different from meeting Jerry Lee or somebody like that. And so anyway, Lamar introduced me to him and said, Jerry, this is Elvis, and told Elvis, Jerry Chesnutt. And he stuck out his hand. I shook hands with him, and he said, how you doing? And it sounded just like a little kid in high school or something asking me, how you doing? And I thought, this guy is just a nice little young country guy. You know, this ain't no Superman or nothing.
Uh-huh.
I to this day, I don't remember how I even answered him when he asked me, how you doing? I probably said okay or something, you know. But then we went on to this. They started the movie, and it was he was with Linda Thompson, and he was sitting right in front of us. And the movie, I never will forget. I love it. The movie, it was Charlie Varick. Walter Matthau played in it, where they had robbed some bank that they thought there might be a couple $1,000 in, but it was a mafia drop, and there was $1 million or $2 million in there. And so they wound up, rather than having some local policemen chasing them, this Charlie Varick wound up with the mafia after him. And it turned out being a great movie and fun. And after the movie was over, there was a bunch of people had gathered up outside knowing he was in there and found out. So we sneaked out the side door, and Elvis got in the car with Lamar and I, and then his car was out front, and one of the other guys went out and got in it, and in the meantime, we pulled out, and they didn't even know Elvis was gone.
Oh, there you go.
But he had left the building, and then we pulled around 2 or 3 blocks there to a certain place and met him, and then he got in his car and said, "I'll see y'all later," and took off down the street. And I remember the horn of it started playing a song of some guy. It was all tuned up, the horn was, to play a song, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he took off down through there. And that's the only time I ever went to a movie with him. I used to go to Graceland when I'd go down there, and he was usually upstairs. And these guys would be sitting around watching television, waiting on him to come down that day or the next day or whenever, and I wouldn't hang around. And Vernon would say, "You want to go to the dog track?" And I'd say, "Yeah," and we'd go across the river over there into Arkansas, I think it is, ain't it? We'd go over there to that dog track and bet on them dogs and all that, and I was really closer to Vernon. I did a lot of stuff with Vernon, but than I was with Elvis, because Vernon was always kind of loose, and I just loved him. He was a great guy.
Jerry, hold on 1 second, please.
Sure.